Hi everybody, welcome to another night of Sip and Simmer with me, Anita Manager. Okay, so like I start every show, we are here for positivity and light and all the goodness that being stuck at home provides. So we're not going to talk about anything negative, but we will start off on my positive note. I want to give a big shout out to Planet Pizza in Norwalk, Connecticut for providing free pizza and food to first responders and medical professionals. That's pretty amazing, and it's a good thing that they're doing for everybody that has to be out on the street. Another thing that I would like to address is I am all for social distancing, and I want to let everybody know that the people that you see in my photographs I actually live with. So my production crew is stuck with me for the time being, so I force them to help me. So I don't want you all to think that I'm having friends come over for me to do this. Also, one more shout out. I want to give a shout out to Shopwell Beauty for this beautiful wig because she knows what she's doing. This wig is everything. I feel like I'm wearing a beautiful helmet. I love it. Okay, so now that we got all that stuff out of the way, let's start with our drink because Mama's thirsty. So I actually created this drink myself today while I was looking for something to pair with a chocolate cake. So it sounds a little weird, but give it a chance. So today what we're going to need, and it's a little complicated, so just pay attention and follow the steps. You're going to need a jigger. When I did it earlier today, I couldn't find my jigger, which is like this little baseball bat thingy. I just did it with a fork. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a quarter cup of frozen berries and you're gonna put that into a glass. You're gonna take a quarter cup of regular granulated sugar and pour that into the glass. And then this is the part that's gonna sound weird, but trust me, it really makes the drink. You're gonna use 1/3 of a cup of red wine vinegar. And you are going to muddle that together. And you're gonna create almost like a paste, and that's what the base of this drink is gonna be. I feel like chocolate cake needs something a little tart and something that is going to complement the flavor. Also with the cake today, what I'm gonna be doing is I'm going to be mixing it with the custard that I had left over from a few episodes ago. So that way the cake has a little bit more pizzazz instead of just a plain chocolate cake. A jigger is something that they use in a bar to do exactly what I'm doing. It's gonna mash up all the ingredients together. You usually use it for something that is more solid, that you want to break down for a drink. Okay, so that is about as mixed as I am willing to make it. And I'm going to take this and I'm gonna pour this into my glass. I'm gonna get about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So we'll say that's what, 2 ounces? Okay, so on top of that, we are going to put in 2 ounces of vodka. We're going to put in 1 ounce of raspberry liqueur. We're gonna do 1/4 ounce of lemon juice. And then we're gonna fill the glass with seltzer. I made the mistake of pouring this too quickly earlier today, so I've learned my lesson. And that is why it makes sense to practice beforehand. See that little fuzz that you get on top? It's actually a really pretty drink, and I think it's gonna pair really well with a chocolate cake. Okay, so I'm gonna give that a little bit of a stir. And that is Anita's raspberry fizzy drink, because I have nothing else to call it. And it tastes delicious in my reusable straw. Okay. So, as you can all tell, I've got my ingredients measured out, and I've got my delicious beverage here, and as everybody knows, nothing in life is free. So my Venmo is Anita_Manager, and feel free to tip me whatever you like, and all of the proceeds from that will be going towards any ingredients that we'll need for the show. Okay, so from here, this is actually really delicious. Okay, so from here I've got my bowls. I've got one for my dry ingredients and one for my wet. and we're going to begin. So I've got my mise en place done, so that just means that everything is prepared for me. This is the best way to bake, and yesterday I showed everybody how to measure properly, so I know for a fact that my cake is going to come out perfect. Here I have 2 cups of flour and 2 cups of sugar. I have 3/4 of a cup of cocoa. I've got 2 teaspoons of coffee grinds. I have a cup of buttermilk. I have 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 2 eggs, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to show you how that all goes together. I'm going to mix my dry ingredients first, leaving out the sugar. So I've got 2 cups of flour, 3/4 of a cup of chocolate. I've got my 2 teaspoons of coffee grinds. I've got my baking powder. I've got my baking soda. And finally, I have my salt. So before I mix my wet ingredients, I'm going to give that a stir, just to incorporate everything. There's that famous word. And the reason that we do that is so that way our cake is nice and fluffy and even. And once that is all done, I am going to start mixing my wet ingredients. Now, like I said, we're going to save our sugar. We're going to mix our sugar and our oil together first to get that good base going for all of our wet ingredients. And we're going to make sure that we get all that sugar nice and wet with the oil. From there, I'm going to mix in my eggs, and I'm going to do that one at a time. At this point, it should just look like wet sand. You're not really going to get a really good wet ingredient batter going quite yet. And as we go, you'll see how the batter really forms. For my chocolate cake, it's a little unnerving as you go because it's just going to get more and more liquidy, but trust me, it comes up beautiful and spongy. All right, I'm going to get my second egg in there. And we're going to make sure that's all mixed. And at this point, it should start looking like our choux pastry from the first episode. Okay, so from here, I'm going to add my vanilla and mix that in. And then finally, I'm going to mix in my 1 cup of buttercream. If you don't have buttercream, there's quite a few options. One, there is a powdered buttercream that you can buy that you can keep in the pantry so you don't have to worry about it spoiling. Or what you can do is mix, get a measuring cup and measure out 1 cup of whole milk. Take a tablespoon out and replace that tablespoon of milk with lemon juice and let it sit for about 5 minutes, and it's going to thicken it, and you'll get pretty much the same consistency. Okay, so from here, I'm going to take all of my wet ingredients and I'm going to pour them directly on top of the dry. Okay, you don't have to really worry about mixing this too well because my final secret ingredient will be coming along, and it will make sure that it's nice and easy to replace. Buttercream? No, it wasn't buttercream, it was buttermilk. So if you don't want to use buttermilk or the 2 options that I gave you, you can also use double cream or heavy cream. It's the same thing. Or if you don't have either of those and you're at home, you could also just use regular milk. You just want some sort of high fat. You can use half and half. Pretty much anything that is in the dairy section. You really just want to get something that's going to be nice and creamy. So from here, I'm not really too concerned about mixing it all too well because my final ingredient is going to really make this mix nicely. And I'm going to use 1 cup of hot coffee. If you don't want to use the coffee, you don't have to use it. You can just use 1 cup of hot water, and if you don't want to use the coffee grinds from before, you can just eliminate it. I know people that are allergic to caffeine, so if you're allergic to caffeine, you can just omit the coffee altogether and just use 1 cup of hot water. So I've got my coffee here, ready to go. I'm just gonna reuse that buttermilk measuring cup. And I'm gonna pour that directly on top. So, I have a few friends that are gluten-free, and if you use a 1-to-1 ratio gluten-free flour, you can make any of my recipes because that flour is formulated to be substituted with any flour. A vegan option, if you're vegan, you know all the tricks to substitute an egg. There's flaxseed and a whole bunch of other things. I've done this for a vegan before using the flaxseed egg trick, and it definitely came out almost identical. So there are a lot of options. I would just make sure that you dose everything out beforehand and get your mise en place done with the egg substitutes. You can use almond creamer instead of almond milk. I wouldn't really use almond milk for this because it's too watery, because basically almond milk is just water. I do like almond milk in my cereal, so I do have it in the house, and I have used it for cakes before. It just waters it down and dilutes the flavor. So if you use an almond creamer, that's a better substitute. Okay, so now that this is all mixed, I'm going to put it to the side for a second. Yesterday, we got to talk about preparing a pan in a square dish. Tonight, we're gonna do a circle. So I'm just going to get this stuff out of my way so you can see exactly what we're doing. Okay, now, when you're preparing a round dish, you're gonna need a pair of scissors, your parchment paper, and my favorite, Crisco. So, we're gonna take our round dishes and our parchment, and we're gonna take the parchment paper and we're gonna fold it in half long ways. Just like this. And then we're gonna fold it in half long ways again. So that way we have a perfect square. From there, we're gonna fold a triangle. So we're gonna take the corner and we're going to fold it like that. And now we have a triangle, and we're gonna fold it one more time. This is the hard part. You wanna try and make sure that you get that point in the parchment paper. So now it looks like I'm building a paper airplane. From here, we're going to measure it to the center of our baking dish, and we're gonna cut a straight line. So that's about center. So I'm gonna cut right there, and I've cut a straight line. So now it looks like I have an ice cream cone. Once I unravel it, we have 2 circles that should fit directly into our pan. And they do. So, just like yesterday with the square pans, we're going to take our Crisco and we're going to get a good smear along the entire thing. You want to make sure that you get in the crevices and everything, because this is going to keep your cake from sticking to the pan, and you don't want any divots or holes in your cake, because we're going to do a rustic frosting today. So you want your cakes to look nice and pretty, so that way they shine on their own without the frosting. So once that is done, I'm going to take my perfect circles and I'm just going to lay them directly into the pan, just like that. A little bit should come up. I don't know if you can see that. Just a little bit on the lip of the baking dish, so that way it doesn't get stuck in the corners. So I'm gonna get the second one done. And we're gonna smush it in there and make sure that it's all nice and good. Perfect. Now, with the leftover parchment paper, you're gonna cut about 1 inch down, and that is what's gonna go on the lip of your baking dish. So you can just tear it, and then you have the lining for the sides of your dish. And you're just gonna continue to do that all the way around. So that way, when your bake, whatever it may be, is done, it will literally just fall out of the pan when you turn it over. Okay, so these guys are all set. Beautiful. So now we're going to take our batter and we're going to pour it so it fills up half of our baking dish. It's fine. We're going to be using this cake for our final bake of the week tomorrow, so it doesn't need to be perfect because, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but you'll see tomorrow. So we're going to pour this until it's about halfway up, and then we're going to go to our second one and pour that guy in there. And that is perfect. Okay, so from here, we're gonna put them into the oven at 350 for 25 to 35 minutes. So just make sure that they are evenly baked. They don't necessarily have to be in for the same amount of time as long as they're evenly baked. How you'll know they're finished is they should have a slight dome and they won't be dipping down in the center, and you check with a toothpick. So, like I said, 25 to 35 minutes for these. And when they come out of the oven, this is what they should look like. It's got a pretty flat top, it domes up just a little bit, and it has a nice shine to it. So this is completely cooled. I did this afternoon. And I also prepped the second one with a crumb coat of frosting. So what a crumb coat is it's just a very light coating of icing on the cake to keep it from mixing the crumbs of the cake with the frosting. So you'll have a little bit of crumb in the frosting, but that'll be fine for what we're about to do next because you're not going to see the inside. So when you line the cake properly, it should just come right out. You see, didn't check this one. If it doesn't come straight out, you can just stick it with a butter knife and just go around the outside, and then it should plop right out. And that is a perfect sponge cake right there. Okay, so on my cake dish over here, I've got my first cake. I've got the crumb coat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a wall with my frosting and fill the center with the custard. Okay, so I've got my buttercream here already in my piping bag ready to go. And in here I have half a cup of butter at room temperature, a teaspoon and a half of vanilla, 2 cups of powdered sugar, and 1 to 3 tablespoons of milk. And that just depends on the consistency that you want. You want it pliable, but you don't want it to be really liquidy because you're creating a barrier for the custard to not fall out of the center of your cake. So what you're gonna do here is you're gonna warm it up a little bit because I forgot it in the refrigerator. Okay, so I've got my buttercream here and I'm just going to pipe it. It's been in the refrigerator for just a little bit too long. Okay, so we're going to pipe that along the edge, just like this. Good thing I'm strong, huh? And that is going to create the wall to keep the custard inside of the cake. There we go. Now, depending on how much custard you want to put in, you do a second row directly on top to give you a little bit more room to really fill that custard in the center of the cake. Just like that. Beautiful. Okay, so from here, we have our leftover custard from the other day and a tablespoon. And we're just gonna give that a little bit of a stir. And then we're literally just gonna spoon that in there. If you're feeling crazy and you have leftover frozen berries from your drink earlier, you can put those into the custard. Okay. So we've got our custard going here. Perfect. Okay. From here, I'm going to add our other cake directly to the top, just like that. And I'm gonna give it a little press. What that's gonna do is that's gonna really adhere the wall that we did on the outside to the top cake. Perfect. Now, just to reinforce it a little bit, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do one more pipe along the perimeter of the space in between the two cakes. And that's pretty much it. You can decorate the top with a little icing sugar or powdered sugar and just sprinkle it. I don't like to ice this cake fully because it gets very, very sweet, especially with the custard on the inside. So this is just going to reinforce that custard just a little bit more. And then you're just gonna go all the way around. Any holes you're gonna fill. Just like that. And then if you've got any leftover icing, you can do a little bit of a design. And that is Anita's delicious, I hate this word, but it's the only way to describe it. It's moist. I know, it's a gross word, but it's perfect. This cake will last in the refrigerator for 3 days, or you can leave it on the counter, but I wouldn't suggest that, especially with the buttercream and the custard. So I want all of you to try this one at home because this is my absolute favorite chocolate cake recipe. And it pairs super, super well with the mixed berry drink. I want to thank all of you again for tuning in tonight, and pay attention because tomorrow we're going to be taking our brownies from yesterday, our cake from today, and making my ultimate favorite trifle dish. Have a good night, guys. Stay well. I'll see you tomorrow.